Welcome to the Influence Experiment, where we seek to explore the art and the science of building influential capacity. Every month, we want to raise thought-provoking ideas of how you can be an investor of the influence you carry. If you're ready to journey with us, then it's time to experiment.
Welcome back, my fellow learners and leaders. This is Tony Villafane coming at you with another episode of the Influence Experiment. Well, today we are talking about overcoming adversity. It's one thing to say that you have the strength to overcome difficulty. It's a completely different thing to actually overcome and come out stronger amidst adversity. When the bottom falls out from under us, we find out what kind of stuff we're truly made of. How do we deal with the plethora of emotions and multiple negative ways that we can respond to adversity? Is there a difference between self-inflicted and life-inflicted adversity? How do we grow as leaders through difficulty, and how do we help others through adversity without being insensitive? It's topics like this where it's advantageous to have someone speak through their firsthand experience of adversity and to give us a needed perspective and to learn from their story. And this is the very reason why I am incredibly honored and grateful to have Lindsay Felker joining me today to speak from her journey and story. Lindsay, my friend, thank you so much for being willing to join me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony.
I am so excited, happy, honored that you would be willing to, again, as I said, that you're going to speak towards some of your story, and you're willing to have the courage to kind of step into this dialogue with me. So just thank you so much. Before we even dive in, could you just share a little bit about who you are, what you're about, why you're here, etc.?
Yeah, well, my name is Lindsay Felker. I have been coming to Gateway Church most of my life. I serve as the Worship Arts Develop intern, and that has been really, really awesome for the past almost 2 years. I serve with our youth ministry with the 8th and 9th grade girls, and I love them so, so much. It's so much fun just getting to hang out with them and experience and do life with them. And just a little fun fact about me is that I love coffee.
You
It's
love
one of
coffee.
my favorite things.
I feel like that's a little bit of an understatement for you.
A little bit.
A little bit. What's your favorite kind of coffee?
Oh gosh. If I had to drink one thing for the rest of my life, it would be an iced honey lavender latte.
Ooh,
Yeah.
iced honey lavender.
I have not had one of those that I didn't like anywhere I've tried it.
I just recently had a blackberry lavender.
Yes, that too. That is
drink,
also
and it
so
was
good.
so good.
So good.
Honey lavender I haven't had though.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to give that a try.
honey is so good.
I'm a sucker for lavender
In
though.
chai, it goes well in chai. I like oat milk in mine. I think it makes it taste better, but yeah. So
Love that so much. Well, hey, as we begin, as we dive in, let me just ask this question: is there any type of comical moment that comes to mind when it comes to adversity? When you think about your past, when you think about last week, back when you were 5 years old, any type of moment that comes to mind, comically adverse?
yeah, so it wasn't so funny at the time, but it is very funny now. When I was a senior in high school, I was auditioning for our school musical, and I was so confident that I was going to get the lead. I was so excited. It's one of my favorite shows that we were doing, and high schools weren't doing it. It wasn't common, and it was really hard to pull off. We were like, we're going to do it, and it's going to be really, really awesome, and I'm going to be the lead, and it's just going to be a great time. Well, then the cast list came out, and I did not get the lead. And at that point in my life, that was the hardest thing that I had to deal with. And I let that take over all of my emotions. I was so devastated, and it took a very long time to recover from that. But looking back on it, the way that I acted was so silly, and I did learn and I did grow a lot from that experience, but yeah.
Well, I can not through theater, but I can relate in by way of sports, where I think it was 7th grade. I got cut from the basketball team, and I was in the last string of cuts, and I was devastated. It was just the worst, and I remember my attitude was not good whatsoever. No. And yet, you look back on it, like, wow, that was such a small thing. But yet in those moments they seem massive, which honestly is a big part of adversity that we'll even talk about, is how in the moment, how radically it does alter the way we think or see things, or can at least. And so, but I think that as we dive into trying to understand overcoming adversity, I think that we should define some terms. So can you help us with this? How would you define adversity?
The literal definition of adversity is a state or instance of serious or continued difficulty or misfortune. So to me, adversity is really just a reminder of how weak I actually am. And yeah.
Well, I think that's a really honest response to say how weak I actually am.
Yeah.
Because our knee-jerk reaction is we like to think how strong we are.
Absolutely.
We all like to think how strong we are.
Yep.
And yet, for you to say it's an understanding of how weak I actually am, it's a reminder, that's not fun. But I think that's a core tenet that we'll probably unpack a little bit further later on.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that comes to mind for you of how would you define adversity at all?
Yeah, I was doing some research, and I was looking at some articles and things, and I found the website for the Center for Creative Leadership, which I first thought that was really cool. But they actually did a study and found that most people's hardships in life fall into 4 different categories. The first one is personal trauma. So things in someone's personal life that they've experienced that they can't control, that have caused confusion. Things like loss in the family, surviving a car crash, or some things that they found out through doing some research. Another one is discrimination or injustice, and just prejudice and things like that are a lot of really common hardships that people have to face. Mistakes and failure. This one stuck out to me a little bit, being a perfectionist, but just loss of credibility, poor hiring decision, and things like that feel like failure and feel like we can't bounce back from, or that we can't learn from it. And then another one is career setbacks, which this one shocked me a little bit, actually, because I didn't, it just wasn't something that I would have thought of. But just organizational wide layoffs, a freeze in hiring, or you didn't get the promotion that you wanted, and things like that, change in leadership, maybe not for the best, and things like that. So yeah, just lots of really cool stuff in looking at that article.
Well, and I think that through the article and through you kind of summarizing that article is to say that there are 4 different major categories, and I'm sure we could come up with others, but I think this is a good way to kind of splice it right here, is to say there's personal trauma, there is discrimination and injustice, there's mistakes and failures, and then there's career setbacks. I think that those, I think we could maybe, if we're going to say career setbacks, we also could say relational setbacks. We could also maybe, so there's a 5th one maybe, but to say that there are these categorical ways to think through adversity is a good way to kind of think through it. Now, in terms of thinking through things, let me ask you this question, is that everyone cognitively knows that going through adversity has the ability to make us stronger. So if we all know this intuitively, why do we resist it so much and hate difficulty, adversity, and why do we try to run from it? What do you think?
Well, just given the definition, adversity is hard, and overcoming that is hard, and nobody wants to face that kind of challenge, no matter what it is. We as humans just would rather look for all of the good things and not sit in the bad things. And so just with that, it is so much easier to just avoid all of the bad things and all of the difficult situations. And it is very easy in those situations to not think of how I'm going to grow from this, or the positives that could come out of this, because they're some pretty crappy situations, and it is hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel in those. Yeah.
No, and we are very, as you just said, we it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's really easy for us to be tunnel visioned,
Right.
and not be able to see the bigger picture of things, or
Yeah.
just like your high school experience that you shared, like nothing else matters except
Yep.
that in that very moment,
Yep.
and so we blow things up on a disproportional level, but also in our minds they seem proportional. It's like, oh my goodness, the world is collapsing for
Yeah.
for lighthearted things, or again very traumatic things, and so yes, of course we don't want to be a part of those types of things. We want to run from that. And so, what would, in speaking of running from it, what are our typical like responses that come when we see adversity at our door?
Yeah, typically we find ourselves in 3 different groups of people. The first group is people who are faced with adversity. They get frustrated and then they just give up, and that's it.
Yeah.
The second group of people are the type of people that push through, remain positive, keep the momentum going through the situation, and they don't let it slow them down.
Yeah.
And then this third group of people is one that most of us will fall in, is like when we're faced with something difficult, some sort of adversity, we will complain about it, we'll feel sorry for ourselves, and then eventually we'll get over it. So...
Because I've never complained myself before
Oh,
about
neither have I.
about adversity. No, but it's true.
Yeah.
We are we're quick to complain. Yeah. How do we choose to? There's going to be a mindset here, and we're going to talk a lot. We're going to talk a good bit about our mindset in the way that we respond to adversity. So when I invite people to come on to be a guest on this podcast, it's usually because of a very specific reason to the topic. And with this topic of overcoming adversity, I know that you are not a stranger to adversity. And I was wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit with us about some of your journey in 2021, of how of what happened, and kind of where God's brought you to in this point of your journey.
Yeah. So early 2021, I went back to college. I was doing really well, straight A's in all of my classes, just really thriving. And then it got to a certain point, right around early March, I started to not feel well. Just physically getting sick, mentally just really struggling with anxiety. And so being away from my parents didn't really see what was going on because I wasn't with them. So my friends, my roommate, they were starting to get a little bit concerned, until finally one day I remember being super confused. I was very confused. I didn't know what was going on, so I called my mom, and I was like, "Mom, I don't know what's going on. I'm just really confused. Like, I got super lost in class, but it's a class that I've been totally fine in the entire semester. It was just like all of a sudden I had no idea what was going on. I can't comprehend any information. Like, I'm just having a hard time thinking." And so it was very concerning to my parents, especially with them being in the medical field.
Yeah.
And so I got in my car and I drove home, and I don't know why. I don't know how I even got home, because I don't remember like physically driving myself there. And so I got home, I tried to go to sleep, but I wasn't sleeping at night, and so like I was tired, and I was just having a really, really rough time. So later that week I went into the ER. They gave me some anxiety medications and said, take these. If they don't work, then we know it's not anxiety, but then we'll have to figure out what it is. And so I was taking those for a few days. Nothing happened. Until on April 30th, I had a seizure, and that put me in the hospital. And I was in the hospital for 24 days, and over the course of those 24 days, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called autoimmune encephalitis. And to be more specific, I was diagnosed with NMDA, a receptor encephalitis. It's basically a long term just for the receptors in my brain weren't functioning properly and caused my brain to attack itself.
Wow.
And so I spent a lot of time in the hospital. just searching for answers. And because it's such a rare disease, I wasn't diagnosed with it right away. And so I just kept getting worse and worse, no matter what the doctors were trying. And they tried to diagnose me with schizophrenia, which is a mental health disease. And they tried to diagnose me with epilepsy, which is a seizure disorder. And my parents, being in the medical field, knew that something wasn't right, and that couldn't have been it, because none of my symptoms weren't lining up. And so finally, when I was diagnosed with autoimmune encephalitis, we were able to get some answers. I was able to start treatment, and there's a very specific treatment for patients with autoimmune encephalitis, and it was really not fun. It took a really long time. It is called a plasma exchange, which is where they take the plasma out of my blood and replace it with good plasma.
Yeah.
And so that takes hours to have that transfusion. And yeah, so once I left the hospital, I did outpatient therapy. And I was in therapy that started about 4 days a week, and I would do occupational therapy, speech, and physical therapy to help regain my strength back, to help relearn how to read and write, because I lost that ability. And my occupational therapist helped me to kind of regain life skills, like how to get dressed in the morning, how to follow a recipe when I'm cooking, and things like that. So yeah, just it was a really, really crazy 7 months of being diagnosed, going through therapy, and just thankfully going uphill from there.
Yeah. Wow. And Lindsay, I can't even, imagine the level of frustration, the level of agitation, confusion that was coming from this period of time for you, also for your family members, for your friends. I mean, I remember talking to you on the phone a couple days, I think it might have even been like 24 hours before you were in the hospital. And so the amount of confusion that was for all of us in trying to figure out what this was, and I, first off, I am so sorry that this is an experience that happened to you. While also, there's a nuanced part of this conversation, which really kind of leans into this next idea, or this next question, which is, at first people are going to be like, what, where are you going with this? But let me explain the idea of self-inflicted adversity versus out of your control adversity. So some of the conversation that seemingly that you and I had together was that this encephalitis, yes, it something triggered in the brain for it to start attacking itself, but it didn't just pop out of nowhere.
Right.
There was a series of maybe more self-imposed things that happened over time that led you to this catalytic brain moment that your brain just decided to do what it did. And so if we can know within adversity that there is a difference between self-inflicted or out of your control adversity, what were the self-inflicted factors that eventually led to life-inflicted adversity?
Yeah. So this is a funny one for me. Well, we don't know how or why I ended up with autoimmune encephalitis. The cause is very unknown. It almost happened out of nowhere. One of the biggest factors in that, though, was stress. And like I said, I was in college. College is stressful in itself. I was a musical theater major, and music majors are stressful in itself. And so I said, I was thriving, but it got to a certain point where I had so much on my plate that I didn't even know what to do. And it definitely took a toll on my mental health, for sure, to the point where my doctors thought that I was just struggling with severe anxiety. And so it was just, it was a kind of a snowball effect from just adding so much to my plate, thinking that I could do all of it, trying really, really hard, putting a lot of effort and a lot of energy into what I was doing, into my studies, into having a social life and things like that, that eventually landed me in the hospital.
Yeah, and I remember even like you and I were sitting at Gateway one Sunday afternoon, and this is
Yeah.
maybe 3 weeks before you
Not,
landed.
I think it was a week before.
Was it a week before?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was the
and,
Sunday before.
And you were just going on and on about how busy and stressed you are, and I'm like, girl, you're gonna burn yourself out. And little do we know, this already was happening in your brain. It was already there. But like this idea of, and we're all prone to this, but this busyness complex that we need to like parade around as a badge of honor, or we feel the stress, the pressure from other people or the circumstances in our life that make us want to keep on going and going and going, which it can be like our bodies are finite.
Yeah.
But we don't like to think about how finite our bodies are. Your body, you literally were faced with the finiteness of your body in a real way.
Yep.
That I pray that I wouldn't wish upon anybody.
Yeah.
And yet, this is now a part of your journey.
Yeah.
It's a part of your story. And how amazing is it to be able to sit even across from you right now and to know that just 2 years ago this was where you were at, and now here you are. And how, I mean, you might not think, oh, I'm so put together, but you look put together, and you look like you know what you're doing in life, and so
I appreciate that. Thanks.
but like this is a testimony to God, testimony to your strength and your family, and just so many good things. Now talk to me about the stages of emotions, because I can only believe and know that there was a plethora of all over the map of emotions that you felt through your recovery when you started coming to. You started piecing together what was going on in the hospital bed from encephalitis, and how these emotions affected you.
Yeah. It was a roller coaster for sure. I've never experienced what it felt like to not be in control of my emotions. And to feel that and to know that I wasn't in control was very frustrating.
I imagine.
I don't remember hardly anything from being in the hospital. Most of my memories are what my parents tell me. My mom spent 17 days by my side. She did not leave my side for 17 days.
Wow.
My dad would come and go so that my mom could go get food for them. I was very sensitive to noises, so they would have to text back and forth, like they couldn't even talk when I was in the room. But I just remember feeling very depressed. Like I was just so down. And for people who know me, like I'm a very happy person. I try to be positive all the time because why be negative? Like, so to feel that way and to feel super depressed and just like that life wasn't worth living was just a totally new thing for me, but also like not fun to think about either. And while that kind of depressive state lasted through a lot of my recovery, I started to then feel frustrated. When I started to come to, and I started to be more aware of my surroundings, and I started to heal, I just got really frustrated because like I said, I wasn't in control of my emotions. I couldn't control things that I had before. I had a really hard time like getting dressed in the morning, like basic motor functions. My mom had to brush my hair, and it was frustrating when I realized like I'm 20 years old, I should be able to do these things and I can't. Like that is really, really hard. And then on top of that, I started feeling anger because it was summertime. So I spent most of May in the hospital. I came home at the very end of May. And so June, July, August is summer. Everybody's going to the beach. They're going on vacations. They're going out with their friends. And I'm 20 years old. I should be doing those things with my friends. I'm seeing on Instagram, like, my friend went to the Galapagos Islands. And I was like, I want to do that. I'm a young adult. I want to travel. I want to do things. I want to have fun. And I can't. And so then the anger set in. And I was just angry that I couldn't do the things that my friends were doing, that my siblings were doing. My siblings went to Momentum and Engage, and I was supposed to be there with my girls, with my students, and I couldn't be. And so it became just a pile up of these negative emotions that I didn't know how to handle. I didn't know how to deal with because I just had never dealt with something that extreme before.
And I can only imagine the heaping amount of emotions that they come in waves, and they seem relentless, and they seem like they just won't stop, and it seems like, oh, am I ever gonna get out of this dark pit that I feel like I'm in right now? And for you to feel those are all real, they're validated, and so those are just emotions suck.
Yeah.
Emotions can absolutely
Yep.
suck as we go through adversity, whether they deceive us and they're not actually what they are, or they are actually what they are. They are really difficult to deal with in themselves. So outside of the difficulty of emotions, what were some of the other difficulties tempting you to give up hope or to allow this adversity to just define who you are?
Yeah, this was a tough question to think about, because for pretty much every day for almost 4 months, I really felt like my life wasn't worth living, and that is really, really tough. That was hard on me. That was hard on my parents. It was hard on my siblings, my grandmother who was living with us at the time to help take care of me. Like, that is so hard on so many people on so many different levels.
Yeah.
But I had a mindset shift in the midst of all of that. And it, again, like going back to the very beginning, it is much easier to look for good things and avoid the bad things. But in the midst of this horrible, horrible thing that I was dealing with, I had a moment where I was like, I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better. I'm going to pray, keep hoping, and I'm going to be better.
Yep.
But it was the mindset shift. Instead of sitting and dwelling in, well, all of my friends are out there doing things and having fun, or I used to be able to do this and I can't anymore, I'm going to be able to do that. I'm determined. I'm going to do it.
Yep. It takes a lot of grit.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of grit to be able to do that, and one in which anyone, if anyone was in your position for those 4 months, they'd feel the wrestling of the temptations of just to give up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And no one, and many people wouldn't even blame you for that. So to be able to say, I'm going to have this mindset shift, and to say, I'm going to live another day.
Yeah.
I want to press on another day.
Yeah.
Like that is deeply admirable, commendable, and just really encouraging. And love that you leaned into that, because we know within adversity that's what's needed, is that you have a choice. And speaking of like this choice, we know that within even the concept of the influence experiment, there is this art and there's this science that we talk about all the time. Science, objective truth; arts, subjective personal expression.
Yeah.
How would you speak towards the art and the science when it comes to overcoming adversity?
The objective truth is that adversity sucks.
Facts.
Nobody wants to go through hardships. But at the same time, it happens to everyone. It's inevitable. And we have a choice in how we respond to it.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so I completely agree, yes, that objectively adversity sucks. And then also there's this idea that like we have a choice on how we respond to it. Like objectively speaking, you can respond to it poorly or you can respond to it well. You can respond to it as a victim or a victor mindset. And so there's different ideas within the objectivity of what is adversity, and there's so many other things. But for the sake of time, what else would you say is some of the art when it comes to overcoming adversity?
Yeah, some of that subjective, like personal things, really comes down to who you are as a person and how adversity affects everybody differently. And just different personalities and how people process things. Like I'm an external processor, and so like the way that I handle hardships is like talking to others, but also knowing the people around you. Like if you are friends with an internal processor, knowing questions to ask, but also not pushing and not prying, and just knowing how your own brain works, but also being aware of others around you too.
Well, and it boils down to a bit of self-awareness and then others' awareness.
Yeah.
And I think that personality piece is a huge part of how we need to be conscientious, be tactful, be discerning over what it means to live in adversity ourselves while also be a friend to someone who is going through adversity, and so I think that those are all pieces of the objective and the subjective that are needed when we think about adversity. But speaking of objectivity, we know as Jesus followers that trial and difficulty are coming. We know that as Jesus followers, that is what he says. John 16:33 says, "I tell you these things so that in me you may have peace.
Yeah.
In this world you will have trouble." He flat out says it. Not fun, but he says it. It's a lot easier to believe that Jesus is with us when we're not going through adversity, but then when we are, it's a lot harder to like sit with him and be present and take joy and whatever. Like, how did your faith play into this adversative journey, and what did you learn about God through it?
I don't know how people do life without Jesus. I just don't. Through everything, like it was easy to be mad at God for letting this happen to me.
I imagine.
And I was angry, and I was dealing with a lot of negative emotions. But in the end, I wouldn't change anything that happened to me because I have grown so much and I have learned so much from it. And a lot of lessons that a lot of life lessons that I wouldn't have learned if I didn't go through it.
Yeah.
And so having my faith, having Jesus on my side in my corner the whole time, even when I felt abandoned, he was still there.
Yeah.
And just having that comfort and having other Jesus followers around me at the same time, like that is something that is not of this world, and was just a crazy experience. So.
And you and I, you know from that experience, and I know from a handful of mine as well, just how much there is a hope that is otherworldly, and in the most amazing of ways, that it comes from Jesus, it comes from Holy Spirit, it comes from God the Father, who is with us, for us, empowering us, and also empowering the people around us to carry us when we feel like we don't have the strength to keep going. So that is a huge part of understanding adversity, that it's not meant to be done alone.
Yeah.
My goodness, I know that some people, you could say people are more independent or dependent in personalities. I think you would say you're more on the independent personalities, but the fact stands, you would say, you need community, even as a very independent person. And I think that in adversity, we need to know that we are not, a temptation is to isolate. A temptation is to retreat into your own headspace. And to kind of block people out, but like that is so not needed. Even internal processors need community to be able to do life with and carry that and shoulder that burden for sure. Now, in the name of shouldering a burden, sometimes people with good intentions may not follow through with the most appropriate actions or words. So let's get real for a second. Are there things that people said or did where you knew they had good and noble intentions through this experience of encephalitis in the recovery phase? It was, in fact, not helpful, discouraging, or even just insensitive, even though you knew they had good intentions, but it didn't carry over the right way.
Right.
We would love to be more informed on how to not make noble mistakes, may we call it.
Something that came to mind was something that I didn't experience in the moment, but found out about afterwards. One of the hardest things was people that cared so deeply about me were just asking questions and wanting to know things and wanting answers, when the people that were closest to me, my parents, my siblings, my best friends, like didn't have answers. And so while their intentions were there, they had good intentions in wanting to know things and asking questions and wanting to be there. It was just super frustrating when we didn't even know what was going on. And people are kind of demanding these things, and we don't, like, nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to tell them.
Sure.
And so, again, no bad intentions, just not the best way to go about things.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that we all, and let me throw myself into that category of, like, there is this, again, the desire to know, the desire to care, the desire to love, the desire to pray, right? Super good things. And yet, there is this needing to be patient.
Yeah.
Which we don't like doing. We're not good at doing as human beings. And I think that is something that being conscientious of when I am, and this is, I'm pointing to this even directly at me, when I am asking a question, how is the other person receiving it? It's like, am I fully stepping into their shoes? It's okay, is my question going to be received with the tone, with the intention that I'm trying to deliver it, and being careful with that. There's a leadership principle embedded in there that's not just about you. It's about the other person, and how am I choosing to think in that way, and being selfless in the way even I try to gain information or ask questions in that way. Now, speaking of leadership, what are some leadership lessons that you have learned through adversity of encephalitis? What would you say to that?
What's really cool about this is that I have gotten to use these things that I've learned already, just even after it's been, at the point we're recording this, a little bit less than 2 years. But I've gotten to see these things play out in real life circumstances. So one of the things that I learned was to put things into perspective.
Yeah.
When things aren't making sense, look at it in a different way. And the whole time I was recovering, things weren't making sense.
Yeah.
Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Why can't I sing? That was one of the biggest things.
Imagine.
But just shifting my perspective and thinking, okay, well, I can't do this now. But if I look at it from a different way, there's hope somewhere. There's light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. And through the Lord, I was able to regain everything back, plus some. I just kind of recovered very quickly. But yeah, just shifting perspective and looking at things a different way when things aren't making sense. And then another thing that I learned was just to be sensitive. And I have never always been the most sensitive person, but just being aware of the things that people are going through around you. And because you never know what someone is dealing with, which then leads me into my next point is just asking intentional questions too, because you never know what someone is going through. So.
Yeah, I think that those are really great leadership principles to be able to hold on to and cling to, and I, again, it's a wild thing to know that through the most difficult moments of life we can learn things. We can learn leadership principles. We can learn about character. We can learn about God. We can learn about more about ourselves, and you are an example of that, and being able. So thank you for even giving the chance to teach us some of those leadership principles from your encephalitis journey. Now, continuing to try to get deeper into this conversation when it comes to leadership and even self-awareness. What preventative measures can people take toward so that they can mitigate, let's call it the self-inflicted adversity? Because life-inflicted, we know it happens, we can't stop it at times, but what are preventative measures that people you think could take to try to stop some level of self-inflicted adversity?
Yeah, I mean, self-care is not selfish.
Say it again.
Self-care is not selfish.
That'll preach.
I have a very driven personality, so to me, self-care looked like I'm only doing things for me. I'm not helping others. I'm not doing things. I'm not achieving something. So that was really hard to navigate. Just taking care of myself.
Yeah.
But burnout is real.
Yes, it is.
And burnout is terrible. And if you don't take care of yourself and you stress yourself out so much to the point where you burn out, it is very hard to bounce back.
Yeah.
And I hit burnout to the point where my brain stopped functioning, but I thankfully was able to learn and come out of that and recover from that. So
Yeah. And Lindsay, it's my in this very moment, my heart is like heavy and joyful at the same time, because like this just happened 2 years ago, but you literally can like almost laugh about it right now, that you're like, yeah, I was at the point of burnout and my
Yep.
brain literally shut me
Yes.
down. And you can say that with a smile, and I'm just like, God, you are so good.
Yeah.
That like this is 2 years later and you're already just like having this like smile about it, of like, yeah, like God, you almost like you allowed some of this to happen as like a way to teach me these things. And I pray and I hope, Lindsay, that you will never ever get to that point again of encephalitis. But like the fact that I feel like God's instilled a very tangible reminder into your life of this is what it looks like if you just try to live within your own strength.
yeah,
All the time.
absolutely.
And again, I would never wish encephalitis upon anybody.
No.
But like, I feel like some other people, and fingers pointing at me at times, of like this idea of like, what does God need to do to me to make me
Right.
realize that I am finite, that I am, I'm just human, and I'm not. It's not the savior complex of it's all about me. So like, I just think that we all need to be careful, and we need to take a lesson from you, and we get to learn of how are we putting precautious measures within our life, preventative measures in our life to practice self-care, and to make sure our bodies, not just our minds, our physical bodies, are doing well.
And then going back into that a little bit, knowing what recharges you and what fills you up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like the things that I was doing at that point in my life were absolutely draining, and I had almost nothing that was filling me up, was filling my bucket, was making me happy. Like it was just task after task and just this one negative thing after another. And so just like knowing what's something that just makes you happy. And I think back to when we were just practicing for our spring retreat with the youth group, and Tony jumped in on acoustic guitar because we needed holes that were to be filled, and he just goes, this fills me up. And I'm like, that's so good.
Yeah.
Like it's just know what fills you up.
Yeah. What are a couple of things that fill your tank, just out of curiosity?
Oh, a lot of things. Music. I just love listening to music, doing music. I like picking up new instruments and just learning for fun. That's something that absolutely fills me up. Hanging out with my two best friends, Grace and Ashley. I love them a lot. And they are two people that stood by my side the entire time. I was sick and literally did not leave me. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And what a gift that those things are, that you get to now enjoy them once again, coming out of the season when you couldn't. Like you said, you literally couldn't sing. Like you had to relearn some of that, which I get. I can't even, like, as an adult, I can't imagine like having to relearn motor functions.
Yeah, it was very weird.
I bet. And like, but so to know that like singing is a gift that it fills your tank. It was ripped away for you for a bit, and now it's fully reinstated. Just being able for you to sing during church, and just to hear your voice just projected to our congregation, and it's in worship, and it's beautiful, and it's confident, and it's these things that's like, wow, like this is you. This is a gift that you have, and something that shouldn't be taken for granted. And how often do we take our gifts for granted? Take our strengths for granted.
Absolutely.
And so that's something definitely to remind ourselves as every day that we can, of how much life is a gift, for sure. So hey, as we begin to land the plane of this conversation, are there any books, any resources, articles that you would recommend if someone wanted to take this conversation a little bit further? You've struck their curiosity about encephalitis or about adversity, and you're like, oh, like I kind of want to like hear more about this. Like, where would you recommend people to go?
So, more specifically with overcoming adversity, a book that I read after I was recovered, when I relearned how to read, I read the book called Get Out of Your Head by Jenny Allen.
Yep.
And just an incredible story of how she had to overcome these like major mental health battles and things like that. And it is mostly geared towards women, but I mean, if you're a dude and you want to read it, go for it.
Totally.
But just a really, really great book. And then another one is Hope in the Dark by Craig Groeschel, and the subtitle is literally believing God is good even when life is not.
Yeah.
So
I love Craig Groeschel.
awesome speaker and writer and everything. And then more specifically about autoimmune encephalitis, there's actually a movie on Netflix. It's called Brain on Fire.
Okay.
And that pretty accurately describes what I went through.
Wow. Okay.
I have seen the movie. I watched it probably about 5 years ago, but I have not watched it since. I have not watched it post brain injury. So I can't speak a lot on that, but my mom and my sister did watch it just to see like what it was about. And in the movie, this girl is diagnosed with autoimmune encephalitis, and it's kind of like her inside thoughts. Like you're hearing her internal dialogue when she can't speak for herself. And so it's pretty cool. And I think it gives a pretty accurate representation as to what that disease looks like. While it looks different for different people, but
Yeah.
overall. And then I have a YouTube link, if Tony can link it in the description.
Yes, I absolutely will do that.
Of a dear friend. Her name is Kayla, and we actually connected because our parents connected when my parents were searching and trying to find some sort of support system that could understand what they were going through. And they ended up finding this couple, the Stores, and their teacher and principal at a school in New Jersey. And so they ended up connecting and talking about their daughter's journey with autoimmune encephalitis when she was 17, so not too far from where I was when I was 20. And then I ended up getting to meet Kayla and hear some of her story. And the YouTube video is an interview of her talking about it. And our stories are almost identical.
Well, okay.
So if you listen to her story, it's very, very close to my story.
Got it.
And then the last one I have is there's actually an autoimmune encephalitis alliance, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
And so I'll send the link as
Yep.
well to that. And it's just information, and you can donate to research and just learn more and hear people's stories and things like that. So just definitely a good resource to learn more specifically about AE.
That's great. No, thank
Yeah.
you so much for the books with adversity to being able to share. We'll share some of those links to autoimmune encephalitis, and so just thank you so much for sharing those, bringing those to our attention. And so, Linz, we're about to be done. So, what would you say? Any final words of insight, advice, maybe caution that comes to mind that you would love to impart to our listeners?
Yeah. Well, I can't leave this podcast without talking about how incredible my parents are. I love them so much, and they love me unconditionally, and they stood by my side the entire time, and still do. I'm 22 years old, and I still ask my parents to come to my doctor's appointments with me. So, and my therapist, Becky, my occupational therapist, she's absolutely incredible, and I love her dearly. I still stay in touch with her. Jules was another one. Curry was my physical therapist. She is awesome. She helped me regain all of my dance ability. Dina and Corey were great in helping me relearn how to read and write. I didn't even know how to write my own name, and they helped me get to the point where I should be as a 22-year-old. So just a huge shout out to all of those incredible people who helped me recover, helped me get through that really, really tough time. So, and then one of the biggest things is I just learned how incredibly kind and generous people are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try not to cry. I told myself I wasn't going to cry. But just like thousands of people all over the world just praying for me, sending cards, gift cards, making meals, literally anything you could imagine, sending care packages, like with my favorite candy and things like that. And I just, like, the kindness and generosity from the people around us was just incredible.
Yeah.
And so I would just say, like, just be kind. And that's really it. Just be kind. And I'm going to say this, Tony, you're going to laugh. But just live life to the fullest. Jump on every opportunity you can.
Yep.
Life is short.
And you know what I'm going to say? That is the most Enneagram 7 thing that I have ever heard. I love it. But you're so right. Life is short.
Yeah.
Go for it. Like, be humble, but go after it. And because we don't know how much time God is allowing us to live on this earth. And so, man, I just want you to know, for the time that God has allowed me to live on this earth, I am very, 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 very glad that some of that time has been able to hang out with you. And to get to know you as a high school senior, all the way to now being a volunteer on our youth staff team, to serving as an intern at our church, to just being a friend. And the different hats that we've gotten to wear over these years has been so much fun and a privilege. And though, Linz, I do not. I'm just so I'm saddened over what you had to go through. I am so fortunate to see you as a woman who is stronger because of it, and is we would say more holy in taking on the character of Jesus. Do you still have your flaws? Absolutely. Do you have your mess ups? Of course you do. Yet you're running towards Jesus, and I can say that I'm looking at a different person in a great way than a few years ago, who was banging her head against a wall with like busyness and some rigidity to her, and also just this like, oh, I can do whatever I want, like like that was. And here you are now, different and matured, and yes, we all have our works in progress of places to go, and needing to keep improving. But just friend, just thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being able to speak in the raw of it, and to be able to shine Jesus through it. It's a beautiful thing to see. So just thank you. Thanks for being a guest here. Thanks for being willing to speak and share your story. It's a gift to me and to our listeners.
Thank you, Tony.
Well, if you are enjoying what you are listening to, you're liking what you're hearing, would you be willing to give us a rating or hit the share button wherever you consume the content? And we hope that you will join us next time as we continue to explore the art and science of building influential capacity. Catch you next time.